Cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first live coding session of 2022. For those that haven't attended before, this is a series that Algolia puts on where we talk to members of the technical community about topics of interest. So we try to kind of do them from time to time, and we're very, very glad to have you here. For those that aren't familiar with this platform, during the session, you're going to see a couple of different tabs. One is a dedicated Q&A tab. So we ask that if you do have a question for any of the hosts today, you would ask in the Q&A tab. There is, of course, a chat tab as well that I see is very active. Folks are telling us where they're from. It's glad to have you all here. So feel free to chat away in the chat. And if you have a question, drop it in the Q&A tab so that we can make sure to pick it up and answer it during today's session. Today, we are joined by three members of the Openbase team. So it'll be the four of us kind of chatting today. I'm glad to have you here. For those who don't know me, my name's Chuck Meyer. I'm a member of the team here, the developer relations team here at Algolia. And for those that don't know Algolia, we are a tool that helps you, we are a tool that provides a set of hosted APIs to empower developers to build search and recommendations into their web and mobile apps. And now I can prove that I can read as well, which is great. And like I said, today we're joined with the members of the Openbase team. So Openbase is a tool that helps developers choose among the millions of open source packages that are available to them. And they just launched the new search on their website, which is powered by Algolia. And I thought today we could spend a little bit of time chatting with a few members of the team about how it works and how they implement it. So we have Lior, who's here from the Openbase team, and he's joined by Lamont and Kim. Lamont is one of the backend devs, and Kim is one of the frontend devs. We're going to take a little time to talk about Openbase itself, what it is, how developers use it. And then we're going to have Lamont tell us a little bit about implementation on the back end, how they're getting data into Openbase itself and how they're pushing that out to their index. And then we're going to end, Kim's going to do a little bit of live coding for us to kind of show how they were able to take existing web components that they had on their site and pivot over to using Algolia. So it should be a jam-packed session. I don't want to waste too much time chatting up front. So Lior, I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Openbase?
Thank you, Chuck. So, hi everyone, I'm Lior. I'm the founder and CEO of Openbase. I started Openbase a couple of years ago to solve my own problem, basically, as a developer. I found myself spending so much time every time I was looking for an open source package, whether it was a grid or an NLP component. I was spending a lot of time on GitHub, on Google, on NPM, on Twitter, reading blog posts and trying to find the best package to suit my needs. And essentially, I figured there has to be a better way. That's why I started Openbase. And essentially, Openbase is a platform. It's a website. You can go to it on openbase.com, and it helps you choose the right open source package every time. It helps you with things like user reviews, different metrics, and a catalog of thousands of different categories for open source. We just partnered with Algolia to build the ultimate search engine for open source to help developers like myself search across 3 million packages across 6 different languages. And I'll take 2 minutes to kind of show you around Openbase and how you can use it to find open source packages. So as you can see in here, this is the Openbase homepage. You can go to it on openbase.com. Let's say today I'm looking for a date picker component. I'm going to go to the search bar, search for date. Oh, you can see I have this specific category for date picker. I'm going to click that. And you could see the search result in here, essentially different open source packages to help me build up a date picker. So I could do things like, sort this list based on my needs. I could filter it based on things like, minimal GitHub star count or less commit or TypeScript support. This one is actually quite useful. So Let's say I'm a Vue developer, I can click it and filter down the results to see only Vue date pickers. Now, let's say I'm looking for React, I'm having a different set of components that I can use. So as an example, I'm going to pick a few components that I like. You can see that I can compare the different packages in here based on the SAR count, downloads, less commit, and user reviews and sentiment from the Openbase community about each and every component. In these different tabs, I can compare the packages side by side based on these metrics. If I want, I can drill down into the specific insights so I can see things like version history, average time between versions, average time to close issues, basically maintainability and popularity of the package. I could also go and read different user reviews about each and every package to see what other developers were experiencing while using these packages. So to sum it up, you open these different packages. Openbase helps you with reviews and metrics and helps you choose the right package for your needs. And yeah, today we're launching this partnership with Algolia and hopefully, be helping you all find the right open source components for your specific needs.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lior. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good sort of overview of how Openbase fits together. So as I said, Openbase has been around for a while. What's new is the sort of the integration with Algolia. And so that's why I kind of wanted to bring in both the front end and the back end folks to kind of dig in a little bit about how this is sort of implemented and how Algolia was sort of layered in. And I wanted to start on the back end with you, Lamont. If you can pop up here. And just want to chat a little bit about sort of how you are architected on the back end. I'm really curious to kind of see what you've got. I know you're a very open graph kind of first shop. And if you can just, pop your video on here, we can maybe have a little quick chat.
So apparently Lamont has a little issue. So
got it.
Again, so sorry about that, Tim.
Oh, no worries. Thank you, Julie. So we'll put the back end on the back burner for a second, and maybe Kim, we can talk to you a little bit about the front end implementation. So spoiler alert, we were going to talk a little bit with Lamont. I know, again, Openbase on the back end is a very GraphQL sort of centric shop. You're kind of used to having GraphQL interfaces that you're consuming on the front end there. And I was wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about what it was like kind of switching from that over to Algolia.
Yeah. So on the front end, we pretty much swapped out our GraphQL interface for an Algolia implementation. So that was my task as a front ender. My task was to swap out our GraphQL implementation with Algolia implementation on the Openbase search component. So that's kind of going to be the talking point that I have. I created a small POC demo.
Nice.
Mainly just because it was either a POC or the actual production code, and I chose POC because it kind of captures the spirit of my journey going from reading the Algolia docs to making something come to life. So I kind of wanted to capture that. But yeah,
awesome.
that'll be my presentation for today. I whipped up a small demo, but the basic foundation is what we use on production.
Yeah.
I also figured the POC, I was looking at production code, there's a little bit of noise, abstraction layers and extra CSS. So it really captures kind of the raw form of what I'm trying to accomplish. So
I love it. Take us through your journey. Yeah, let's show.
Yeah.
So you said you started with the docs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started with the docs. I guess you want to just jump into demo right now? I guess I could share my screen.
Sure. We are live coding, so
okay.
you are the star today because Kim is our live coder today.
Okay, let me share my screen real quick. I'll give you a small sample of what I was, a small sample of demo code. So this is kind of the POC. Oh, let me get my. I'm trying to get my. 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm imagining, so this is basically kind of the same search bar that we see on the Openbase site, just without kind of the super cool colors and stuff going on the backside, which I love.
Yeah, exactly. It's very bare bones, but this is essentially what when I'm exploring new technologies, I really just want to, my first goal is really just to come up with a demo, play around with the tech,
Sure.
see how it works with our stack. So, you saw Lior do a quick demo of what we have in production, but this is what I came up with for a demo. So, we can do buttons, and we're getting data from Algolia. This is all Algolia data. So this is the end result. This is essentially what we want as a POC. It's like, we're getting data from Algolia, and we're pushing the data into our already existing components. So that was actually an important requirement that we had. We weren't really looking into creating new components or working with new components. We really just wanted to use our existing custom components and feed the data into that and be done with it. That would result in quick turnaround times. So we weren't really looking for a library that would handle components or UI elements. So we just really wanted the raw data.
Got it. So and what framework are we in right now, Ken?
React.
Okay, got it. Cool.
Yeah,
that's what it looked like. Just wanted to say it out loud.
Yeah. So here we have a React component. So this is the demo. This is what you see here. Very simple implementation. Again, with the POC, we really want to keep it simple. We don't want too much noise. We really just want to capture the foundational building blocks of what we want to accomplish. So that's why I put this thing together. And it's really an emulation. This isn't actually the code that I worked with. This is like an emulation of what I wrote. So yeah, we have a search bar component here. We're really just concerned about two data points right now. One is a search term, and the other, we also want to keep track of the packages. So we're keeping that state local using our use state hook. So yeah, again, keep it simple. We just want to keep track of these two data points. I guess I could back down a little bit. So here we have a simple input here, over here. I have a search handler here, which just sets the input value to state. So now we'll be able to access the search term through the local state. But this is kind of the meat of the project here. Like this is this is what drives the project. We're getting data from our packages index. So there's a little bit of boilerplate code that we need to add. First, we need to get our API key or app ID keys and API keys, which I'm getting through environmental variables. And then next step would be to initialize a client. So we're initializing the Algolia client. And then we will initialize the packages index. So right now I'm using a dev packages index that Lamont set up, but this is pretty much the boilerplate code that we need to access our data.
Cool. And this is all using, of course, the Algolia instant search library for the front end. And I see you're using the light version, which is sort of focused more towards this read-only sort of scenario.
Exactly. Right. We could use the Algolia search will work too, but yeah.
Yeah, light is what we want to be doing for front ends. That's the right way to do it. So yeah. I love seeing that. So okay, so cool. So we've got you're pulling in your app ID and API key from environment as you should. You're initializing a client. I see you've got the appropriate index in there, and then you're associating that with your search bar tool, I assume. Right?
Yeah. So the way this works is, we're keeping search term. We're up in this state. We have a use effect hook. So basically, what this is I have a use effect hook with a search term dependency. So each time this updates, this block of code will run. So again, this is POC. So you probably want some sort of debouncer in there when you go live. But again, just for clarity, I left that out. But yeah, so we have the packages index here, and we're actually going to use it. And there's this method search, pretty straightforward. We'll feed it a search term, and there are some options here. I think for now, we can pretty much ignore this, but I do have a filter on here, which is basically a key value string. I'm basically saying here, I want to filter out the only JS package, but we could, if we wanted to, we could, filter only Python packages. But for simplicity's sake, we just want JS packages for now. Hits per page, that's how many results you want. But that's the funny thing is you have Lamont in the back end, archiving 3 million plus packages, and my job on the front end is to maybe output 10 to 20 of those. So,
that's the challenge, right? That's the secret sauce right there.
Yeah. So yeah, hits per page and click analytics. We can go back to, if we have enough time, I can go over some of the analytics we wired up for this project. But click analytics will just basically provide a query ID, which is what you need in order for the Algolia analytics to work correctly. But yeah, so moving on from that, we wait till this resolves. We have a data payload. So if you take a look at the shape, well, we could console log it out, but we're really just concerned about hits. These are basically whatever implementation you are. They're basically like, if your e-commerce site is probably like products, like Best Buy or Lacoste. But hits basically represent our products or our packages. So it'll give us a list of packages. So we'll set that to the packages state up here, which is an array. And then it's really just a matter of outputting it. So I have this map here in the down below, which is just iterating through the packages array. And the beauty of this is I was basically able to pipe this package data into our existing component, which is package cards. So I did very little work to get the package cards to work, which we already developed, designed, and went through usability tests. So we didn't really want to touch too much, of the code for package cards. There was a little bit of a lift because the Algolia data was a different shape from what we got from GraphQL. So all the data was there, just a little bit of a lift to kind of get the data working correctly with the package. But I was
gonna actually ask that because so obviously, to your point, the shape of a hit coming back from Algolia is different from the GraphQL. Did you do that transformation in the state layer, or do you just pass the hit along as regular, just as Algolia state, and then you changed it in the rendering layer when you actually like render the component?
Yeah, so I changed it in the rendering layer. Our package card component for this particular use case isn't that complex. We're not really surfacing that much data. So yeah, that's I changed it on the rendering layer.
I'm always curious about that, right? Because there are a couple different ways to do it. You could essentially manipulate the hit as you pass it into state so that it's essentially completely seamless to the component. But for your case, because it's just like the package name and a few kind of simple pieces of information, it was fairly easy to just kind of change the rendering.
Yeah, it was easy. Yeah, so I went that route. But I could see we could do some remapping. How we could do some remapping on on the data layer. But yeah, our component is simple enough where we only have a few data points here that we can that we need to output. So yeah, I went that route. But again, the lift was pretty minimal in that case.
Very cool. And the going from the kind of the GraphQL version of this to the Algolia version, if you take out sort of the changes to the rendering layer, and we're just talking about sort of the call out to the search API, the setting of the state information, like what would you say like the diff in lines of code was? Just kind of rough estimate.
Yeah. So so one thing I wanted to prepare was a comparison between our GraphQL implementation and the Algolia implementation. What I found on prod though is like I ended up like we have so many abstraction layers that I didn't want to like kind of parse through all the noise essentially. But one thing I can guarantee you is it was more lines than what we have here, like for this, which is probably what, 10 lines of code, but then a little bit of boilerplate. So no more than like 15 to 20 lines of code. I can guarantee you it was more than that. So it would have been nice to have a comparison, but I think it would have been lost because I'd just be, drilling down, a few layers just to get my point across. But
Right.
yeah, more than this for sure.
This is off the cuff, and it might be more of a Lamont question, but I'm also curious. So one kind of difference here as well is that, to your point, a lot of kind of what Algolia, the value that we bring to the table is around being able to sort of configure results to make sure that you're kind of getting the best result set, right, for whatever's coming through. And a lot of that configuration is actually happening on the backside in the Algolia world, right? We configure the index with particular sort order, rankings, all of those things.
Right.
Is that significantly different than sort of what you were doing with GraphQL? Was a lot of that in the front end before, or was that already sort of pre-baked into the APIs that you were calling?
That was pre-baked, I believe, in the API.
Okay.
So it wasn't really being, it was when it comes to sorting and filtering and all the facets, that's Lamont is handling most of that work. But yeah, it was pre-baked into the API when we were working on it. Yeah.
Right on. Very cool. Very cool. And do we have Lamont back at this point? Lamont, are you here?
I am here actually. Yeah.
Right on. Welcome back. So I'm trying to think, Kim, was there anything else? I know we kind of went out of order here, but before I jump over to Lamont, the other thing I wanted to kind of ask you, right, is so obviously you mentioned earlier that we got to think if this were an e-commerce site, we would be talking about products and product listing pages and product detail pages. Obviously, in your world, that's packages. So we've got the great search bar page that you come into, a package listing page, right, which is I assume what we're going to here. And then we drill down from that into product detail pages. And the other thing that I think we were kind of talking about previously was that that's a transition over to your database, right? So for the listing page, we're doing Algolia search. And then as we go into details, that's when you actually would go back and hit the GraphQL sources again, right?
That's right. Yeah. So the two search experiences are the toolbar at the very top of our page, and then we can drill down into our search results page, which is also Algolia. But once you drill down to the package, that's when we're hitting our database for that info. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. And then the other piece too is obviously, like you were saying, that filter with the lang.js, that's hard coded right now, but that in the real world would be a drop down within the search UI or a facet that would be selected. And this thing that I super love is that essentially, regardless of whether I'm doing Python or JavaScript or whatever, we get a consistent interface across all those languages.
Yeah. And one thing you'll notice too is we're also pulling in other data besides packages for JavaScript. So if you do buttons, we have category data we're also pulling in. But for the POC, I really just decided to just keep it simple. But we could easily, with maybe less than 15 lines of code, pull in category data as well. That'd be fairly an easy task. I'm not sure if that's something we want to go over, but it's the same pattern essentially that we implemented here.
Right on.
For our packages. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing the front end. And I think we're going to dip back over to Lamont on the back end now. So Lamont, if you're able to appear before me, that would be amazing. There we are.
Let's see how this works. Yeah. Hi.
Hey, welcome. Cool. So Kim's been walking us through the front end, right? And the changes as you sort of pivoted from GraphQL to the Algolia API for search. And he's pulling a lot of interesting data. So how'd that data get in there? What are you doing on your side?
Well, we are interacting with, I think 8 or 9 different backend services that house package information. NPM is the biggest of those. We're also pulling in like PyPI and Crates.io, Maven. We all pull those into and do like an extended extract, transform, and load process on them, and then index those into Algolia so that you can find them when you search for things on our site.
Right on. And so we talked a little bit previously, and you'd mentioned that, again, you all are very big on GraphQL, and you have a
Yeah.
really kind of interesting layer for sort of normalizing the data across. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. There's obviously when you go and look at our site, we're a very heavily read optimized workload. All the data that you see for packages and stuff comes out of our big PostgreSQL database, and the API which feeds that is built on a tool called PostgreFile, which is and this is
I
a
love,
page from our site showing
yeah.
showing PostgreFile. Yeah, it's a what I would call an old school rapid application development tool that lets you point it at a PostgreSQL database, and it comprehends that the schema for your database and emits a GraphQL API that your UI can then consume and write queries against. It's remarkably lightweight for what it does. I think we figured out when we put it in our cluster, it consumes a maximum of like 500 megabytes of memory under a big load. So yeah, it's a cool tool, and I think when you go and look at this page, about 90% of what you're seeing is sourced from, I think, like 5 different SQL views that are
Oh, wow.
stitched together by metadata that we use to tell PostgreFile how the different entities are related. So
Oh, that's super cool. Now,
yeah.
when I think about grabbing all of NPM, right, or all of PyPI, I have this horrible vision of like, either crawling a website or pounding on an API. And I know that's probably not what you do. And I was just curious, if you're going to live downstream from one of these sort of, sources of truth like NPM, I kind of would love to hear sort of your thoughts on being a good citizen, right? Having good etiquette and sort of the way that all stitches together.
Right. Yeah. You want to keep in mind, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a Fortune 500 company or, a team of volunteers that's keeping that service running. Somebody's responsible for keeping it up. And if you go and dump, 10,000 requests on them in a couple of minutes, it's going to ruin somebody's day. And you just don't want to do that. What we try to do is look for, I mean, obviously, NPM is our, they're just shy of 2 million packages in NPM, I think. And that's our biggest package repository. They have an API that we could crawl if we wanted to, but that would be really inefficient to go do all that. So we'd look for alternatives to like subscribe for changes. Like NPM in particular publishes a read replica of their CouchDB. And one of the features of CouchDB is you can like stream notifications of updates to a Couch client. That's very efficient, much more efficient than going through and polling through an API. So that's how we get our updates through NPM. PyPI, I think, has a similar construct, and I think that goes out through an XML RPC client, a little old school there. And Couch has a couple of interesting alternatives. I think they publish a GitHub repository that you can actually clone and receive changes as diffs. And they also publish like a SQL database dump of their database. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, you want to look for alternatives to just like going and crawling an API, because that's this is really inefficient to go work that way.
That's smart. Yeah, I did a project a couple months ago where I was pulling down some of John Hopkins COVID-19 data, and they do a similar thing where they drop it all in a GitHub repo and you can pick it up there. So
yeah,
that's interesting. And so you're kind of using a combination of all of these different things, and you're sort of you're pulling in, you're following whatever your upstream provider is recommending as a best practice. And then the challenge, of course, I'm thinking in terms of the index, right? So now you have sort of this Algolia index that also needs to be fed. And it's pretty easy to just go ahead and, generate a JSON file and push it up. But your challenge is that, these are shifting sands, right? These are sort of all packages, systems that are all sort of changing all the time. So how are you keeping that data evergreen across all the different package managers? And how are you keeping, more importantly, to me selfishly, like how are you keeping that index evergreen as well?
Yeah, for the individual pieces, I mean, a lot of that, well, the architecture that we're pushing toward is all serverless. So like particularly NPM, when we get notified of changes through their CouchDB change stream, we get we post messages to AWS queues, and Lambdas pick those up and then do all the processing for us. The how to get those changes into Algolia, we index like 3 million packages, like like you said in your intro. That takes multiple hours to push all that data into Algolia over, even over like bulk updates. So we have to do some on-demand stuff. So anytime that someone, and when you look at the search results, you are seeing things like review ratings and things that we don't get from our backend provider. So some of that has to be federated into Algolia from from our system.
Mhm.
So whenever somebody leaves a review for a package, we've got to update that score. So there's there's another serverless message queue and a process that runs through and pushes an update to the Algolia index. So the updates have to be constant and live. And also we have to have the capability to do like big bulk universe updates for when when we picked up a new attribute that we want to index, or we want to have a new facet exposed.
Cool. And are you using, I know you were saying, very specifically about sort of ratings and number of users and things like that. Are you using the partial record update features of Algolia to do that, or are you updating full records each time?
We aren't currently doing partial record updates because it's just more expedient for the process that we're in to just get a snapshot of that package data from our API. We run a query very similar to, there's less data, but we run basically the same query that gets run by the UI when it builds this page. So we just get a subset of that data, and we're getting it all anyway out of our API. So we just do a full record update. At some point in the future, we can get a granularity of what's changed, so we can do the partial updates, and that would be a lot more efficient. We're just not there yet.
Right, because I'm imagining a situation, right, where you've got the core package information coming in from the package provider. And I'm guessing that might not necessarily be real time in all cases. You're probably like, if I push a new package up to NPM, I'm not going to see it on Openbase the next minute, or am I?
Yeah, well, I think we're striving for to get to a point where our like an hour SLA or something like that. And I think depending on the back end, we're pretty close now. I know NPM, our updates come in pretty quickly with that process. So it's a goal for the future to get down to as quickly as we can.
Right
Because
on,
we kind of want to be the record for stuff like that. So yeah.
Awesome. So you'd be pulling in that information from the NPM site, layering in, when someone comes in and does a new rating. I'm assuming that can be, you have full control over that. So that happens a little bit more real time, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's those are messages that are posted to queues from inside our own API, and they all stay inside of our virtual cloud. So that happens really quickly.
Right. So if you, as a huge consumer of PostgreFile, if you wanted to give it its 5-star review, it would be picked up right away.
Pretty quickly, yeah.
Not that you're biased, but awesome. So what is the most, what would you say is kind of the most interesting pipeline, sort of soup to nuts, going from a package manager to your system of records, which is, I guess, the Postgres, obviously, and then out to Algolia?
Yeah, the probably the NPM one is the most interesting, because there's a lot of NPM is one of the oldest and largest services that we index stuff from, and they've been around for a really long time, like internet dog years. So some of their the oldest packages that they have, the definition of what's complete data has drifted over time, and some of the oldest packages that are there often are some of the most difficult to parse, just because we have to do more work to get data into the format that it's expected to be in. Once things get there, once things get into imported from NPM, we have to figure out what GitHub repository is, because we're pulling a lot of issues and star data historically from GitHub, and that is this is kind of what that process would look like. Yeah. When we get a notification that we need to update some stuff from GitHub, messages get posted to queues, and Lambdas pick up, and then we branch out and pull in individual data for commits and issues, pull requests, releases, and stargazers. I always love that term, stargazers, but those are the people that have starred a repo in GitHub, so that then
I
we can
love
pull that
it.
in and show
That's
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
And when you update the Algolia index as well, that's running, you have a Algolia client running within a Lambda function as well to do those updates, or is that a batch process?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that Lambda is responsible. It receives a message that just has a package identifier in it, and then goes and actually queries our GraphQL API, gets some data down, and does some scoring based on some of the data that we've gotten from GitHub here, like the commit trend and the average time to release or to solve an issue, to close an issue, and we can use that to sort of influence bump packages higher or lower in search results based on our read of how active they are, and how many stars they are, what's their popularity.
Very cool. And I know Kim mentioned kind of offhand turning on Algolia events, right? So Algolia has the capability, as people are navigating your site as well, right, to show when folks are clicking on a particular package, selecting it. Is there any intention to sort of bring that into some of this process as well, as far as ranking?
Yes, yeah, there would be. It would be really interesting to have the concept of conversions, which for us would be like somebody going and installing a package as a result of having found it on our site. That would be really interesting to have that factor into how we're ranking things in search results. I think we do have plans to do that in the future, and I'm pretty excited that we can feed that back into refining our ranking algorithms by getting metric data out of Algolia.
Right on. And we're going to switch over. I think we're going to switch gears here to asking some questions here in a minute. But before I do, I got to ask. So all of these serverless functions that you have, what are you using to orchestrate them?
Well, mostly the orchestration comes in through just the fact that they're all servicing individual queues, so they're very restricted in what they're doing. We do have one situation where when we interact with the crates.io API, we have a very strict limit on how many requests we can make in a slice of time. And being good citizens, we try to live by that. So we actually have a step function, which is like an Amazon serverless state machine, which manages the 4 different lambdas that have to interact with that API to make sure that they collectively don't exceed the number of requests that we're allowed to have per time slice.
Right
So
on.
yeah.
So old school asynchronous queue-based decoupling for the most part, but then step functions when you actually need like real orchestration between them.
Yeah, more elaborate stuff when you need the real hard orchestration. Yeah.
Right on. Well, I'm going to ask Lior and Kim to come in again, and we do have some questions here from the audience. And the first one I'm going to throw out there, I don't know if this is more, I think this might be a Lior question, is Lior, someone wants to know if there's any way to integrate Openbase into VS Code or an IDE right now. Is there any sort of plugin, or is there an intention of doing plugins?
So currently, unfortunately, we don't have such a plugin. We are thinking of that direction, like basically integrating Openbase more within a developer's natural workflow, namely IDE integration and CI/CD integration as well, right? So we can kind of like sit on top of like the manifest file and help developers kind of validating the packages that they use and make sure they use up-to-date versions, they don't use anything deprecated, and give them stats about things like effect on bundle size, and licensing issues, security issues, etc. But this is on our roadmap, but probably something that would take us a few good months to come up with.
Oh, wow. Well, I got to say, like, one thing that I think is interesting when I'm doing Algolia projects is I tend to write in Python for the backend, for the data ingest, the Lamont side of the world. And obviously I'm doing a lot of JavaScript on the front end. And so I'm managing like a poetry file along with a package.json. And boy, it would be really swell if I could just do an openbase.json file and just have it all taken care of. That would be something.
Wow, yeah. Absolutely.
That's cool. And we had another question about categories. right? And I think you touched on it a little bit, Kim, when you were showing the front end, that categories would be a separate index the way you're set up. But do you want to talk a little bit more about Openbase categories and sort of how those work? I don't know, Lior, if you want to start maybe by talking about how they're created, and then we can talk about maybe how they're implemented.
For sure. So as some of you have seen in the demo, we have a few thousand categories on the website. These categories are intended to cover any new use case, like as a developer that you have. Let's say you're looking for a front-end component, so we have categories for things like tooltips and grids and typography and stuff like that. On the back end, we have like different utility builds and cryptography and storage and APIs, basically any type of use case. And these categories are basically curated lists built by the community with the Openbase team. And inside each and every category, you can find packages that were curated while still being able to, use Algolia to filter, sort them, find the right one for your needs. So that's where they stem from. And where we find it useful is, it's basically a short list for developers to be able to find the right package for a specific use case, for a specific framework. That's the way it works.
Got it. And those are obviously curated by you, kind of managed through some sort of internal UI, and then surfaced as an index on the front side, and obviously surfaced within the Postgres as well.
Exactly. So we do have our back office kind of like managing these categories, and we get a lot of suggestions every day for like new packages on every category. So say you're a package maintainer, you could go to a specific category and say, hey, my new package fits this category. You would send a suggestion, and our team would go over these suggestions and place the different packages in the relevant category through our back office.
Right on. And then that all gets stitched together in the front end through the index, and then obviously through on the individual pages as well. So I have to say, I love that concept of categories and categorization. I think it really helps for doing comparisons and sort of building out different toolkits based on what you're trying to do. So that's a nice value add. The next question is actually, I think for me, Chris is asking, does Algolia have an on-premise or self-hosted search solution? We are definitely a API first SaaS-based search. That's kind of our bread and butter. We do have sort of an open source crawler that you can use to get the data into the index, but the index, in order for us to do what we do, the optimizations that we do, the indexing, the configuration around facets, we are a SaaS product. So that's where you would be using us. And then does Algolia handle anything like type ahead or fuzzy matching? And that is absolutely what we do. That is 100% of the value that we add. So if you're using Algolia for your prefix-based search, your text search, you're going to get a lot of opinionated configuration out of the box around fuzzing, typo tolerance, synonyms, things like that. But then you also have the ability to go in and configure that on an index by index basis. Say, hey, actually, I don't want as much fuzzing on this. I want very specific text search. I want this to be faceted. I want this to be shown in the results. But it's all done as a SaaS offering. So it's all kind of baked into your index. So let's see, what else we have here. Another one from Chris. Can you specify any custom weights ranking? Oh, lots of questions about Algolia. So we can get a little bit more to the one-on-one, but yeah, absolutely. You can do weights, you can do ranking. You're hitting all of the real spots for what Algolia does well. But he says, I saw Openbase could sort by recommended. How does that work? So how is your index set up to show like the recommended ones on top? That would be kind of an interesting question to answer.
Yeah, that's I touched on a little bit of that when we were speaking about it, but that's where we factor in like the popularity, the number of stars, and weekly downloads. We factor in like the average review score, and sort of nudge things up and down in the listing based on those factors. So we're still getting like the fuzzy text matching that Algolia gives us out of the box, but we can promote things that are more popular or more relevant based on the audience that's doing the searching.
Cool, right on. And one question another user asked was on PostgreFile. Do you guys happen to sponsor them, just out of curiosity?
I don't know if we actually sponsor them, but I know that we've worked directly with Benji, the maintainer, and I think like the almost 100% author of that tool. He's a great guy. Hi Benji, shout out to Benji if he's watching.
I would argue that sweat labor is sponsorship to a certain extent, but that's good to hear.
We have given him money. I'll put it that way.
All right, cool. And let's see here. So this is a question, we kind of touched on this one as well, about the ownership boundary of data between Openbase and Algolia. And I think we really kind of dug into this a lot, Lamont, about how you have your source of truth is your Postgres, and that you're using that to feed the index. And so that data does come across. As far as the configuration, that's all done on the index side, right? So there's for folks that haven't used it before, configuration for the Algolia index is essentially just a JSON file. You can do it in the dashboard, but that's where you sort of all of the fine grain about like, these are the fields I want to show. This is the ranking that we want to do. All of that is sort of done on the index side.
Yeah, for interests of like replayability and testability, we're actually storing the configuration as essentially JSON inside our GitHub repository and deploying that as part of our continuous integration and build process. So yeah, I don't actually use the dashboard if I could avoid it, although it is really nice. Yeah, I
think that's kind of an interesting point. There's kind of these two differing use cases with Algolia indices. One is that you are very closely tied to your business folks. Your business folks obviously don't speak JSON. So the dashboard is an opportunity, for like an e-commerce situation or something like that, to sort of tweak and say, hey, I want to make sure that this particular pair of shoes is the first thing that's shown. For your use case, you're obviously very automated. You're dealing with a massive amount of data that needs to come in an automated manner. And therefore it would be kind of catastrophic to be in there and sort of manually trying to tweak that stuff. So that is a really good use case for the APIs and JSON for that, and sort of building into your CI/CD process. That's something I'd love to drill in more. I might actually, Lamont, I might reach out to you again about sort of some of that process for a future one on operationalizing Algolia, if that's something you'd be willing to talk about.
Yeah.
Speaking of manual data, though, another question that came through is around the categories again. So obviously the categories are very sort of a point of interest to the developers out there in the audience, and they're curious about scalability. So sort of this manual process of sort of putting things into categories. What are you thinking as far as how you're going to scale that, as we're talking about millions and millions of packages out there in categorization? I think I know part of the answer here, Lior, but do you want to drill in on that a little bit?
Yeah, and it's actually quite a tough challenge, and we've been thinking about this a lot. So Openbase basically started as a JavaScript shop, while right now with Algolia we have support for Python and Java and Go and other languages. So we started by tackling this niche by niche, starting with specifically JavaScript front-end components and React components. And obviously now we have the challenge of expanding our categories to support more languages and more frameworks, etc. So we kind of tackle this at like several directions. One of them is improving our internal tools, allowing us, basically a way to categorize the packages within these categories faster and more efficiently, right? And as time goes by and as our community grows, right now Openbase is being used by 500,000 developers approximately every month. That means we get a lot of inbound suggestions for these categories. And every time we introduce a new category, you have a nice like suggest new packages button at the bottom. So we get a lot of inbound that we obviously have to go through. The other thing is, as we evolve our community, we want to start appointing community moderators and admins, right? And kind of like, giving the community more control and ability to build up these categories. While right now we do this mostly manually. So hopefully with having like, a dozen members from the community helping us expand and build to more and more categories, and having more and more suggestions coming from the community, we hope we can probably get from like 5,000 categories to maybe like 20,000 categories across, 10 different languages.
I love it. I love it. And I think going to your community is a great way to do it. I also love this, I love the idea of maybe expanding beyond just comparison tool to like curated stacks, right? Like this is a problem I want to solve. What are the packages that work together well, right? Based on what other people have done. I think that would just be so useful for someone who's lazy like me to just be able to sort of build on top of all of that good knowledge. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think there was one other question. I saw it out in the chat, not on Q&A. Drilling back into that IDE integration, someone was asking about, well, can I just use the index directly? And I think there's definitely opportunities, but I feel like really the best thing to do is just hold on and see what Openbase does, because I think they're going to be doing some super cool stuff in that space too. I'm definitely looking forward to having it sort of as close to my VS Code as possible. Let me see what else we've got on the questions here. Someone was asking about used menu builder. Is that a package you maintain? They said they got it from Openbase, but I wonder if they just mean that they found it on Openbase. Is that something you're familiar with, Kim? Used menu builder?
I'm not familiar with that, actually, no. That was a package that they found on Openbase?
Yeah, it says, I'm trying to use menu builder code from Openbase. I'm wondering if maybe this is just a package you found. I guess the best thing to do there, right, is to go to the package page and you can drill down to find out who the package owner is. Would that be kind of the best thing to do and ask there? Does it seem like the right way to do it?
Yeah.
That would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, just want to make sure the way it was worded, it could have been an Openbase package that you have out there, or it could have been something they found. That's the challenge, right, of being sort of the layer through which all packages flow. I would imagine that if you open source a package, it's like, wait, is that an Openbase package or is that a package from Openbase?
Funny thing, in the early days before people recognized the name Openbase, we actually got a lot of support requests on Openbase, assuming that Openbase is the author of this package. And I think over time, as more and more people get to know Openbase, they know it's basically a platform for like package search and discovery. They at some point get to the point where they're like, oh, okay, this is like hosted on Openbase, like it's hosted on GitHub or NPM, but it's not necessarily maintained by Openbase. So interesting distinction.
Cool. This is actually kind of an interesting one for you as well. It's asked as an Algolia question about type ahead and customizing what shows up in type ahead. Like, can you do type ahead across a product name, popular product, category, et cetera? And this is something that you've actually addressed, right? Because you're doing type ahead across both packages and categories. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that actually fits together? I know we didn't actually implement the category part, Kim, but how does that work when you actually have sort of multiple indices or multiple different pieces that you want to sort of layer together into your type ahead for search?
Yeah, so with the POC, my first approach to the multiple indices was really just to double up, on essentially just double up on the code just to see if I could get it to work. I would specify a categories index, make the search query against that index and then set it to state. But again, that was kind of a naive approach, just experimenting. There is a method, multiple queries, I believe it's called, where you can essentially make one call against multiple indices. But you can find that in the Algolia documentation, but that's probably the more performant way to do it. But when I was creating the POC, it was really just a naive experimentation. So I specified 2 different indices and just called the data from there. But in prod, you probably want to use multiple queries for that sort of scenario.
Cool. And for your use case, what you're doing is you're querying against the multiple indices, and then you're aggregating those results and displaying them with the categories to the top, I believe, right? Is typically how you. Okay.
Yeah, the categories take priority in the listing. So yeah, those take priority, and then the packages below that. But yeah, cool.
And I would be remiss, I know Sarah Dan would be upset if I didn't also say that, like, in this particular use case, we're using the instant search front end for Algolia, but there's also an autocomplete library that we provide that allows you to do sort of type ahead across multiple data sources. And it has more of that autocomplete where sort of the results pop up directly into the search box. And you have the opportunity there to do sort of more of a federated search where maybe instead of listing everything together, you could actually have like, these are the categories, these are the packages, these are, you know, kind of whatever else. So that's another way you could kind of go about doing that if you wanted to sort of, rather than sort of layer everything together, you wanted to sort of show each of the different categories individually. Oh, and there's a question about your user profiles. So another user asked, you recently Openbase, you recently released Openbase user profiles. Are those indexed as well? Are you actually able to search across profiles yet? Or is that something that you've thought about?
They are not. I'll leave to Lior whether that's something we've thought about or not. I think it's an interesting idea. I think the nuts and bolts of that would be, it would be a federated search similar to how we do searching between categories and packages in terms of, you know, implementation strategy.
Yes, absolutely. I do think it's a great idea. And right now on the current implementation of the search, you could see packages and categories. While in the future, we want to add other entities such as tutorials, user profiles, code examples, and basically other types of entities that we have on the website. So right on.
Cool. Awesome. And yeah, this was actually, someone kind of sent the link to this USSD menu builder. It looks like that is not directly you all. It looks like it's under an individual user here. So I would say reach out to the individual user if you're having an issue with the library. But it's so cool you're able to find it through the Openbase site. Cool.
For sure. You can click the maintenance tab, and in the maintenance tab, in the menu at the top, click maintenance, and you could see the full list of maintainers and contributors for this package. Very
cool. All right. I think we made it through all of our questions and we're right up on time here. So I'll be looking forward to that profile search in the near future. And more packages, I suppose that's what's kind of coming in the future as well, right? We're going to see more and more different package managers across here as well.
Correct. More package managers and more frameworks for each package manager, and basically kind of like expanding to other ecosystems.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you all very much for joining me today. It was really fun to be able to sort of chat across both the front and the back end of a product and also get the kind of the full vision all at once. Hopefully you out in the audience were able to learn a few things about integrating with Algolia, about being a good consumer of packages and upstream data sources. And you can visit me, talk to me, tell me what you think. I'm over on Twitter as Chuck M. And I would imagine for the rest of you, we should just send them over to Openbase, right? So.
Yep, you can visit openbase.com and start using Algolia starting today. So
live today, that's
send us your feedback. Yep.
Awesome. Well, Kim, Lamont, Lior, thank you so much for your time. And thank all of you for joining us. We'll be back in March with another interesting topic. So we'll see you then. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.